Hello, YouTube and BitChute friends. Upon some reflection, I sometimes reflect on things. On thoughts emerge. I even have certain opinions. And as one of my favorite internet friends, Dean Harkness, has expressed in his last video, he was very complimentary on some of my presentations. And just generally, I think we like each other quite a bit. He said that all things have been expressed. All thoughts are basically in the ether. Our experience of the world is predicated on principles that, upon further reflection, may in fact be wrong. Like so many things that we've thought about in life that make sense and are true, truth being a moving target. There's a difference, in my mind, between fact and truth. Facts are, to the extent that we're able to observe, if there's such a thing as objective observation, a fact is a fact. You throw a ball and it leaves your hand and it curves through space and it hits the ground. It's a fact. And then we develop a truth associated, a principle, a truth associated with that fact that we observe. And this is where things get kind of mucky-fuck because, as I say, truth is a moving target. Interpretation of the facts is not necessarily truth, but quite often it's perceived to be truth as, but it's like absolute. There is like an absolute quality behind truth. So a lot of my interest for most, well, I wouldn't say most, but in the last, I would say few years, 2, 3, 4 years, have been to create a context for my experience, how I perceive the world, the things that are important to me, and to come to some kind of a workable, and when I say workable, like mentally for me, my relationship to the mystery, to the world, something that makes sense within me, that is as much as possible independent of, as Dean Harkness says, all those thoughts that are out there already. There's another experience that we have within ourselves that I would say is quite unique. Each individual, why do we look all different? You know, okay, you have twins, but there's subtle differences between twins. Why is everything so distinct? There's a reason behind that. So we're on, I think it's like multi-level chess. There's so many levels to this, and I had mentioned the idea of originality as being something very sought after in a world for good reason, because we represent originality just in terms of our appearance. There are blanket similarities, but there are also very from subtle to extreme differences between people. Just look at facial recognition or eye recognition or fingerprints and all that. So there is something to be said for the for that notion, that sensibility that we might entertain of something being quite unique, even though I would agree with Harkness on the fact that there appears, from the way I see things as they unravel in the world, to be this kind of ether of thoughts that we draw on. We're like a receiver. I think he said we're like, did he say that? We're like a receiver and a transmitter. So we receive and we transmit the thoughts that exist. Hence, you hear on the most common denominator of human being that has a mind, regurgitating the shit that we're being told all the time. You know, on any level, from scientific to religious to social to political, they're all just regurgitating things that we already know. And I've said in many videos, we all know, but we choose to act in a certain way, not based on what we assume to be facts or truth. Maybe truth is, like, again, truth is a weird thing for me. But we don't bother with the facts. Like during the shit show, nobody bothers with the facts. You just go ahead and regurgitate and do what you're told. And here's my point. The system. how the system works. And what is of interest to me is to be engaged within this mystery that we exist in. On the highest level, I'm able to be engaged with this mystery. Hence, I make paintings. And even though in the big scheme of things, I would not consider myself in the from the business point of view to be a success with my paintings, the way businesses function. I mean, no business functions unless you make a buck. And businesses are, in essence, exist for profit in order to sustain something. And making art, in my case paintings, some sculpture, the essence is not profit, but the essence has something to do with a higher level of myself, how I'm engaged with the mystery. And being a business person is engaging with the mystery, but on a lower level, on a level where I would say it doesn't need to be on a lower level, I guess. I don't know, although it's very difficult because profits generate greed. And then as soon as you get into these weak personalities, certain emotions take over and then ruin the whole thing. So you could have a wholesome business venture that is on a very high level, but it generally doesn't work because greed kicks in. So, but I'm not interested in business. If I were, I wouldn't be making paintings. I wouldn't be making art. All right, so that's out of the way. What's next? Okay, what I'm talking about today, what I was on further reflection, the system we're in basically regurgitates. This is something that I would fundamentally endorse, that all thoughts, ideas exist in a kind of ether. I'm not sure why or how that works. However, there is within this mystery of our existence and our interaction with the mystery, there is an element of uniqueness that represents itself in the way, for example, we express our curiosity, the way in which we are able to take a subject and use the physical world around us. I'm a physical person. I use paint, for example, to express that curiosity, which in itself determines an absolute. Okay, what I mean to say, to the extent that we can arrive at a conclusion about anything, considering the complexity and all the things going on, I mean, having answers is a very difficult thing. Referring back to Picasso when he said about looking at paintings, other artists' paintings, he doesn't want their questions, he wants their answers, which is a noble sentiment. I agree. But again, within that answer part, it kind of escalates toward complexity, and at a certain point, the complexity is overwhelming because our minds as human beings are somewhat limited when it gets to the highest part of this mystery, or the highest part within us of this mystery. So, what my comment today is about is the system. The system that is established around all of us in its most fundamental way. And the system, the way it functions, is on what I've understood to be basically two principles. One is authority, and one is the execution of that authority. So, as an example, you could look at any system that we adhere to is based on authority in some form or other, whether that is legally or by example even. Let's say a person is really wise. There is authority in wisdom. It's not enforced by the true wisdom of a person is not enforced by a gaggle of barbarians with guns or clubs. but it's enforced by an acquiescence within a person to accept that authority, to say this really makes sense, it's fabulous. On the other hand, the system also functions on a level where this authority becomes exercised through brutal means. Coercion, as in the shit show, for example, authority is exercised. And I'd like to remind people now, one of my big things has always been the internal and external world. So when we talk about authority, obviously you're probably saying to yourself, well, yeah, Tom's talking about the world out there. And the world out there becomes an extraordinary preoccupation for most people. Like, if you take it in terms of what I say is, when people comment or think about anything, it's usually something going on out there, not within, which separates creative types and artists, because the work is reflecting something within. Although even at its worst, there's always still an inner component in anything that a creator will make. And I could go into arguments about what I understand to be contemporary art being completely regurgitated. There is very little of an inner world being expressed, fundamentally because it lacks any heart. The heart and the soul, that force within human nature, has been extracted out of the work. When you go to a museum and you look at the shit that they put up these days, all the heart and soul has been extracted. The artists actually are preoccupied with extracting soul rather than emitting and contributing their soul to it, which means the inner world is excluded fundamentally, although there is still an aspect of inner world because they're showing how you can extract the soul, how you can extract the significance and importance in an artwork you produce, in a painting, anything you make. If you're able to extract as much heart and soul out of it, the owners, the bastards, will love it. They will actually pay you a fortune. Now, they also pay fortunes for Van Gogh, but he's dead, so they haven't got control over that stuff anymore. But they certainly can control the Banksys and the Julian Schnabels and the Eric Fischels and the Pollocks, and, well, maybe not so much Pollock anymore. But the bastards, the owners, they love this sort of soul-extracted work on the walls. All right, anyway, my premise, the system. The system works on authority and the execution of that authority. Now, as I have said, there are external aspects to this authority, which is, I would say, 99.9% of all operations on Earth. The mystery looks at us and is chuckling, is laughing, and saying, well, I guess they got to go through this to see their lives from an external point of view. In other words, external authority being enforced by some sort of mechanism. And I still say the Swami type is an external authority, but as it filters through us, I think it's a much more benevolent authority rather than that stick kind of idea. And the stick idea, the authority, I would say probably began, to the knowledge that I have of history, if we go back in a definitive way, probably happened with people such as, probably even specifically, if this character actually existed, this Akhenaten type, who had been compared to Obama. They said the images of Akhenaten looked a lot like Obama, and his weird wife, flat-faced wife, whoever that was. They had some kind of, I think I might have been photoshopped. I don't take it too seriously, but anyway, the Akhenaten character managed to convince the people around him, from the top down, high people of influence and importance, all that he was the direct liaison to the omnipotent being, and as such should have omnipotent power on the earthly plane. So the omnipotent being, the mystery itself, anointed Akhenaten to be the authority over the external world. All living things, all matter, all living things were subjugated to this character, this supreme authority. And out of this supreme authority, all actions filter. So whether that is on a macro scale of authority, let's say these days it would be, I guess, what we consider to be superpowers, the countries who demonstrate extraordinary resilience and fortitude as a clan, as a tribe, that could literally, either through business or cultural influence or military influence, exert enormous results on the rest of the world, to the point of even destruction, possibly. It's like this kind of authority. So the system that we find ourselves in, and just just before I end, before I come to the end, this system is extremely destructive based on this type of functioning, that authority and the execution of this authority, or the transmittance into the dissemination of this authority, has been extremely destructive, like I say, from probably this, if in fact this history is true, back to Akhenaten. And then the Akhenaten types, which are represented in whoever are the backroom boys nowadays, I would even say that Obama isn't even close to an Akhenaten. He's just a figurehead. All these figureheads, these people that represent this extreme authority, which comes out of somewhere. We're perplexed, we're wondering. It's not the Rothschilds, it's not the Jews, it's not the Zionists. All these kind of organizations that have been labeled to be this extreme omnipotent authority, they're actually not. What is in the back, this is really curious to me, because there is a functioning authority on the level of the Akhenaten types, but they're not known. And for good reason, because if they were known, if you can cut that head off, the whole thing may actually, they tried that in the French Revolution and it didn't really work. I mean, they did get a republic out of it, but old boss, new boss kind of scenario kicked in again. So the head was not really cut off. When they chopped off the head of the king and the queen, it wasn't the end of authority in that sense. The new boss was virtually the same as the old, especially now as we see it has developed. Maybe there is a period of grace and we have our freedoms in a way, and we feel good about ourselves and all this stuff. As long as the system functions in the way that we see it functioning, there is an authority and a kind of perpetrator, that enforcer of that authority. And in order for us, the way I see myself, in order for me to counter this aberration within the mystery, I mean, it's there for a reason as well. I think this idea that things happen for a reason, because for me to imagine and insist that it's just, in German you say nur so, it's like a coincidence. There is no coincidence from the point of view, you cannot have this level of complexity with just random evolutionary formations. I mean, the idea, this incredible complex system, like, I don't know, was it Robert Thurman who gave, again, the example that if evolution and the whole idea of things just happen randomly, you literally should be able to have a hurricane go through a junkyard, and we should consider the possibility that at the end of this hurricane having occurred, you would have a perfectly formed 747 fully fueled, ready to fly. Okay, it may be an extreme example, but if you are on that kind of evolutionary idea that a little slimy single cell, which wherever that came from, Terence McKenna said, give me a miracle, wherever that came from, I'll explain everything else, however that slimy little thing crawls around somewhere in the waters, in the primordial soup, wherever that was, and then ends up me sitting in front of this screen. Yeah, if you are a proponent of this kind of thinking, there is no reason to listen to me, because It's so irrational, even on the lowest level of thinking, that considering how complex things are, you could not imagine this happening randomly. And like Thurman also said that to Carl Sagan, who was a devout atheist, who said there's nothing when you die, Thurman said, well, how do you conceive of nothing? As human beings, all we're capable of conceiving is something. So to say there's nothing is incomprehensible. So you're full of shit. You're crazy. You're nuts. You're a fucking nutbag to say there's nothing. Because you can't conceive it. I'm not saying there isn't nothing, but I can conceive of nothing. What is nothing? So when you go down this rabbit hole of this experience, how we function within this experience, an original subversion, don't know what it might have been like before Akhenaten. People have ideas and thoughts. What was his father's name was Namer or something. Apparently there was still kind of a reverence, in a sense, for the mystery. But Akhenaten steps in and kicks the shit out of the mystery and says, I'm the man. I'm the man. And that's what we see now with the population being as whatever number it is. There is extreme success on demand, on authority. And that authority being disseminated through its minions who are threatened by my opinion. As you see on YouTube, I get strikes regularly. I have to keep my head down if I want to continue on YouTube. Doesn't make much sense. BitChute, I get the same views. It doesn't matter to me really. But I keep within I curtail my comments about the shit show. That's what it really is. The shit show is a shit show run out of the back rooms by the Akhenaten types for good reason. But my interest is not so much in the significance of the shit show to me in terms of real life, but more in terms of my inner life. So how have I abandoned what I refer to often as my calling to be not living the highest part of me? So my point today about the system and people who are interested, who are really dismayed, depressed, upset within their own lives. Quite often that has to do, in my case as well, with personal interactions that are hurtful possibly, and things that aren't working out the way I'd like them to be, ideally. But the system itself is represented within all of us to the extent that we can change anything only if we change ourselves. So my point about the system and authority and the dissemination of that authority needs to fundamentally shift to the inner kingdom. As Jesus referred to, the kingdom of heaven is within. This makes a lot of sense. I've noodled on this and have attempted to understand this. I think the best explanation I have is this metaphor, this reference from the rabbi, the way this individual was represented was with extreme wisdom. It represented to me having extreme wisdom. So the authority comes out of wisdom, not out of a hammer or a club. It comes out of inspiring my own inner world to activate. And this is ultimately the highest authority. You hear about people, let's say, who are incarcerated, who are in prison, or people in the camps in Germany who were treated just miserably, abusively, but didn't lose their heart and their soul like the art has these days. When you go into a gallery, the artists have capitulated. They're not under any pressure, but they've capitulated. And think about the people who were under this extreme stress in the camps or any circumstance, and they still maintain that spirit, that life within, that inner authority that exercises itself, maybe not on the perpetrators directly, because there is obviously factual physical vulnerabilities, but sustain themselves and pass this power on to others, maybe through their writing or other forms of expression, or just speaking to another person and continuing this spirit in a long line of people who understand that we exist within this mystery, not as authority over anyone out there, but authority over ourselves, and then disseminating that authority, which is always in relation to that complex mystery that we live in. We don't brutalize. We don't brutalize the world out there, because the world is, again, on that level of metaphor for everything that exists. So even if we see a tiger killing a wildebeest or a gazelle or whatever, there is, from the point of view that I imagine, what is that experience? It's not one of brutalness, but of the mystery working in such a way as to fulfill and bring to fruition the highest part of all creatures that exist. And it appears from our perspective to be antithetical. There's the biblical thing of David sitting in the lion's den, and the lions don't touch him, and the lion sits with the lamb. Again, I find that to be a metaphor, not so much to be interpreted in the real world, but in an inner world, that we can have very contrasting, opposing views, but still have a balance within us on these opposing things. This is something a lot of people don't have the ability to bear, this frustration of opposing things going on within oneself, but ultimately that is the goal, that we can entertain the extremes without falling apart. So my point today, the system exists primarily on two facts: authority and the dissemination of that authority. And the issue is whether that is an external authority or an internal authority. And this is a choice people need to make. And as this becomes, let's say I'm a romantic, I'm an optimist in the sense that I say, as long as there's a spark in people that understand this, as long as the spark is alive and it's not extracted, cleverly extracted through coercion or through seduction, whatever way this might work, but practically speaking, as long as there is a person left that transmits this sense of inner authority, in whichever way they're able to do it, people have different expertise. Like I say, I do my work as an artist. I don't say I make a painting, I'm going to disseminate my inner authority. No, it's inherent in what it is, who I am. It's not what I do, but who I am. I am the work I make. It's not you are what you do, it's like you do what you do because you are a certain way. Something like that. I think I heard somebody say this, you are what you do. No, you do what you are. Yeah, that's the right way of putting it. So our issues, all the people that are entertained by current events, like wonderful people that make comments all the time. I listen to the Durant. They're getting a little boring to me because they seem to be focusing just primarily on the outside world, as opposed to, let's say, an Alex Jones type, who is all about the outside world as a vehicle toward wisdom or something like that. This is the Jones approach. The Duran is, show me the facts, man. Show me the facts. Of course, the Duran is those two guys are very hesitant to use wisdom in an interpretive way. What I would say would be a wisdom applied to the clear analysis that they make of the facts, but then what is the transition into this into the context of things? They kind of sort of, they're afraid to be named conspiracy guys and all this. I mean, they're hammering the Ukraine and the West with all their analysis. So why not just come and do a thing without having to refer to Russia or Ukraine? Just do an analysis of the nature of the system that you're analyzing. That would be a really nice thing from the Duran, but they won't do it because they're afraid to be looked at as like, oh, these guys are flakes, like Alex Jones or something. And Alex Jones is the other extreme. I mean, here's a person who's trying to make hay like a priest, like the bishops, like these sissies in dresses. Alex Jones is another sissy in a dress because he's trying to make hay on this vulnerability in people. This is the vulnerability of knowing that you got to go inside somewhere, but you always focus it on the outside world. Anyway, I think I'll end it here. What have we got? 30 minutes. The system on the external side of things is impactful, disturbing, all the things from extreme to minimal. It's all represented. All aspects of our experience is represented in the system. Authority and the dissemination of that authority. The crucial part is, as far as I have determined, the highest thought I can have that I can share with you, which I've said in different ways over the last few years in my videos, is to shift away from understanding ourselves through the world out there and begin to understand it from within. Probably in different stages and different levels. It's like before I die, I feel that I'd like to come to some sense of resolution of what it meant to be to have lived during this time, using what's there, what's given me, but understanding it entirely within myself and that relationship to, it's really difficult. Like Thurman said, you can't conceive of nothing. In the same way, you cannot conceive of this complexity. It's more likely going to be some intuitive understanding that is not necessarily represented in words or even images, music, whatever. It's an intuitive inner knowing, and I'm on the path toward that. I give myself a chance. I give myself a chance by pursuing something that has nothing to do with an external authority. Making paintings, being creative, has nothing to do with an external authority. So I'm giving myself a chance because of it. And people say, I had a chat with a friend yesterday, and when I was in my 20s and 30s, I was very aggressive in the world out there in terms of making the world work from a business point of view. I had a successful house painting business. I employed people. It started to get bigger and bigger and grow, and I dropped it all. I managed to escape the event horizon of activity, what I call also entertainment, and I think intuitively, I shifted away from that business model into the creative side and made it work. I've been able to make my creative thing work since, I would say, my mid-20s on a more or less full-time basis. I don't think I did a job for money after, like a physical job in the business world, and that after 30, late 20s, early 30s. So in a combination with having, actually my partner has been so influential in sustaining me, very supportive both ways, financially and emotionally more, and getting things working. It's much easier when you have two entities pedaling the same bike in the same direction. So I've been extremely fortunate that way, and with its ups and downs, obviously. Um, but my journey, my path has been, I would say, definitely early 30s. I was out of the system for the most part. I didn't have the entanglements, the business entanglements. And oh yeah, my friend said, you could have been probably, if you'd continued, a millionaire. For yeah, within that system, to have continued, I don't know. Things change, things happen. I don't know, but yeah, definitely, I I made a lot of money, and relatively speaking, most people were earning, let's say, in the 70s, mid to late 70s, let's say a person was earning, if they were doing really well, they were making $50 a day. I was making as much as $300-400 a day. I'd wake up in the morning. At the end, I'd made $300-400, and I guess that's for the mid to late 70s, that was pretty good. Uh, and Anyway, it established what I'm doing now, what I'm saying. Whatever I did then, the benefit and the value was that I'm doing what I'm doing now because of all the things that happened back then. And I abandoned the external authority for an inner authority. So I hope that helps. The system functions, like I said, on keeping our eyes on this elephant, on this external elephant, and the authority. And everybody analyzes that external authority all the time, and how it's disseminated. And I'm saying, until we shift, truly shift, and call it out, it'll just keep developing. It'll, like a snowball, it'll just keep getting bigger. And it's pretty damn big. It's pretty damn big right now. I could go on this. I'll just stop here.